Buzzy and I was keeping up anywhere I have to sign my way down. Send it to Buzzy. So, and he's doing the same thing. So anywhere he's putting his sign. So.
You check and see if it's on there.
So then I have.
We're live on YouTube. Mayor. We're live on YouTube.
Okay, welcome to the July 12th North Logan City Council meeting. It looks like we have, oh, Buzzy, I know he's coming, so, but we'll have a full house once he's here. And then we will open with a pledge by Roger, after which Craig will say the opening prayer.
Everybody could please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Father in heaven, as we gather in this meeting this evening, we're grateful for freedoms which we enjoy. Grateful for this country. We're grateful for those who serve and protect. And ask that God would watch over them as they're away from their families. Bless us that we'll be able to make wise decisions in the things that we do for our community this evening. Say this in Jesus Christ's name.
Amen. Okay, I don't believe we have any changes to tonight's agenda, so I would accept a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Roger, second by Emily.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. I don't believe we have any minutes. Is that right, Marie? Okay. And then Alan, do you want to go over follow-up and review of action items?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. We'll go over a little bit more of the Civic Center design process. You can see the building being built right now. It's coming along well. The HR focus, we just went through performance reviews, employee discussion, staff raises. It went well. And then communication committee, there'll be some social media posts this week and just keeping everyone up to date and informed. I think that's been really effective though, and there's always room for improvement though, of getting that information out. Our new website, which is in the works, will tie in a lot more with social media. It'll actually be built into the website. It's kind of the trend right now to get information out to the public. Water, well 5, we're just waiting on a part, and then that building will probably start building. And then we're working on several studies right now. They've done 2 water model studies. Master plan is being updated, and we're going through each one of those. Looking at sewer, they've done the acoustic pipe monitoring, and based off of that, they're going out and they're jetting hotspots throughout the community. So if you see a sewer jet out there, if you see something, just so you know, that's what's taking place. For streets, everyone knows how busy streets have been last week, and all the other departments are helping with that. It helps it run along smoothly. So they just did their friction seal the last couple of days, and they'll do that for the next 2 days in a few subdivisions. They completed 8th East, 16th East, and then they'll move to Johnson Park and one other subdivision. So extremely busy crew right now, and then they'll start doing some painting after that, or striping of the roads. Stormwater, they're still working on the 3100 North box, and which is a dual purpose, which we received a grant for. One to relieve canals for stormwater, and also just a general stormwater basin in and of itself. Going down through engineering, they're working on several projects out of the city. We'll go over 2 or 3 of those tonight, including 2500 North 8th East roundabout. That's primarily more. It's basically funded and operated through UDOT. And so we just get updates as they go through that process, and then they'll start reaching out to the affected property owners, which we've been in contact with, but then they'll have a lot more dialogue at that point once they have some preliminary draft designs, which they're nearing. We're just encouraging them to shrink down the roundabout in each discussion. A UDOT roundabout is a lot larger. We do not need that, and so we keep shrinking down the actual roundabout to fit our needs as a community. Parks, again, they're incredibly busy right now helping out with the other departments, including streets, and then doing their projects in and of themselves. There's several projects going on in the parks right now. Trails is the same. We had a Trails Committee meeting, just focusing our efforts and working with the county. And the county's going to be a help and an aid in organizing our efforts. Recreation, again, they're gearing up. They have Pioneer Day coming up. We'll go over that a little bit later in the meeting. It's an extremely busy day, largest Pioneer Day celebration and parade in the valley. It's an incredible event that they put on primarily through volunteers and the staff. Facilities, they go through and they're doing a hazard assessment in each of the shops, and just some minor repairs in several other shops. Cemetery, they've almost got the secondary water finalized. That's a major project to get water up to there, but that'll be a huge benefit to the city as a whole to not have to use culinary water on the cemetery, and being able to use those secondary water rights up there. Community development, that's up to Scott. He received that grant and he's finalizing the scope of work for the general plan. And there's so many things each week that people bring up and ask us questions about property, everything else. And there will be so much public involvement in that general plan process. We're hoping to really get something that's a more up-to-date plan that will work well for the citizens of the community and have their involvement in that process. And they're going over several things this week, including some of the residential landscaping ordinance, which is part of the water conservation efforts, and an incentive program from the state. Economic development, there's constant outreach right now, meeting with several businesses, meeting with individuals, groups, and existing businesses, talking about expansion. We had a good meeting today with Central Valley this week was Valley Implement, last week was Central Valley Machine. But we meet with these businesses and just see how they're doing, and then ask if there's anything we can do to help them. These businesses are valuable to the community, and these visits go very well. It's a good opportunity to talk with them and see how we can help in that process. Treasurer, they're updating the sewer rates, which they do each year, based off the winter usage. And then communication, they're helping out with to get in touch with each of the different units. I'm just jumping down through here. Workers' comp audit, which we do every year. Recorder, they're going through a lot of the depreciation schedules, updating that for each department. It's a large task that he has to do each year. Library, we could go through all the events coming up. We have several large programs across the entire summer. And so we could look up each of those, but that's their major bulk of everything that they're doing right now, in addition to general library services. The police, they have a new drone. They've taken some shots of this area over here, and probably in the future, we'll talk with Chief about the abilities that the drone can have, including thermal imaging. And so that's a really exciting aspect there. And then we'll talk a little bit more about code enforcement officer later in this meeting. Fire department, we can go over several of these things, but the new ambulance 120 has arrived. Other things that we've come up with, though, and I've been in discussions with Chief. Chief has come up with several good ideas that we'll have to explore related to replacement of fire engines. I mean, they are massive expenditures, 1.5 million or plus for an engine that can be 3 years out. But in working with Logan, we might be able to work on utilizing some of their capital, coming over, buying some of that. It's a good idea that the city council need to explore in the coming months. So that's up to Chief and going through that. And also potential grants. This next year is when we add a 5th employee at Station 120. And there might be options for community our size to look into grants that cover 70% of the cost of that new employee. So the Chief's lined all of these things up, and so we need to explore those a little more fully.
Okay.
Sorry, I jumped through a lot of those pretty quickly, unless there's other questions.
Any questions for Alan on that? Okay, then we will move on to recognition of an exemplary staff member. Today's is Zach Root. Zach Root has done an exceptional job this year, making sure North Logan City always has water. He spends long nights and many weekends to make sure the system's always running at its peak capabilities and fighting numerous gremlins. Zach has responded to numerous emergency calls this summer including hazmat and safety sensitive situations. Zach is an instrumental part of North Logan City and is irreplaceable. I've had the opportunity to work with Zach on several things, and he's wonderful to work with. And I know that he also really takes his job to heart. Like I think the summer months he's working nonstop. So we're lucky to have him, and let's give him a round of applause. Okay. With that, we will move on to our current action items. The first will be a public hearing to receive public input regarding North Logan City's proposed application to the Council of Governments for funding for engineering, property acquisition, and improvements for 6th East Roadway from 2200 North to 2500 North. Following the public hearing, the City Council may consider approval of this application. Jordan, you want to give us the background on that?
Sorry.
You're good. So you guys are all aware of 600 East between 2200 North and 2500 North. That stretch of so-called roadway is in poor shape. It's basically just a double chip sealed road that we're really struggling to keep maintained and keep operable. It's also a safe route to school. So during school hours, when before school for about an hour and after school for about an hour, there's a section between the furthest north house right there and to 2500 North where the gates are closed, and we allow students to walk on the roadway because there is no sidewalk, there's no shoulder, there's nothing for them to walk on other than the road itself. So as you also know, there is a development going on that corner on 6th East and 2500 North, the Smiling H development. With their development, they will improve 600 East across their frontage. In their frontage, they'll do 26 feet of asphalt, curb and gutter, as well as an 8-foot asphalt path. That path is there to act as a safe route to school. So with that being improved, it leaves a big gap between that section and 2200 North that needs installed. This road has been needed installed for a long time. It's on a massive road that it stretches from Hyde Park all the way to the center of Logan City. And so it's a major roadway. With the COG application, we can apply for a spot improvement. So with the spot improvement, we can apply to get that road fixed, and they will grant up to $300,000 for a spot improvement. So what we would do is there's still a lot of sections of this road that would need developed in the future. And so we would come in and do the portions of the roadway where the development has already happened along the houses in front of the houses there. So basically from 2200 North, and if Alan kind of follows up, it goes up to that log cabin. So right there is the last line, but to about right there, we would just go to a skinnier road section with an asphalt trail to tie into 2200 North. And then if you come further south, the road would be on the east side, and then it would transition to a full cross section. And if you scroll down a little bit more, you can see that the areas that are unimproved along 600 East would have that first cross section of 22 feet of asphalt with an 8-foot path. So what that would do is it would provide the 8-foot path for the safe route to school, and then it would provide enough driving surface for a safe road. And then as development came in, they would tie onto that roadway to expand it. So then on the other sides, they put in curb gutter sidewalk, or on the east side, curb gutter sidewalk. So then in areas where just the east side already has homes on it, but the west doesn't, it would be that unimproved in the middle where it'd have curb gutter sidewalk, a walking path, a small park strip, and then we'd have our asphalt section. And then in the bottom section is where it would be on the areas that are fully developed on both sides of the road, which would be the full cross section of the 8-foot path, and then a 5-foot sidewalk on the other side with the 8-foot park strip. So that's what our application is for a $300,000 grant for a spot improvement in this area. Right now, our rough numbers come back that the city would participate in that somewhere between 150,000 to 250,000. So these are rough estimates right now. We'll work with homeowners. There are some agreements along that roadway. I've already talked to a lot of the homeowners on there. So we would work on trying to cut those numbers down on our participation to be more in line with the 200,000 range.
So Jordan, when you talk about the existing agreements with homeowners, is that for them to participate
Yeah.
financially in those improvements?
Yeah, and if you look on that roadway, and I've had the opportunity to talk to a couple of them, I actually used to live on that roadway, but when they bought their homes, you can see that they didn't develop out into the roadway. And this was a common practice back in the 80s when this was done, is they didn't have to pay for the frontage improvements at that time, but they may in a later date. So we're just going through paperwork to see what people understood and what is actually documented.
So are we confident that's binding? That was the questions that were coming up last year.
We don't know yet.
We really don't.
And so so worst case scenarios where we're looking at, like we'll plan for worst case scenario on doing the frontages. And then hopefully we can bring that number down with participation, because we're also looking at participation from owners that own undeveloped lots. We'll be reaching out to them to see if they want to contribute during this project to get the whole cross section put in. That number is if we did the whole cross section. So
Okay.
if there are areas where it's undeveloped and the owners of those parcels want to chip in now because it saves them in the future, then our costs would come down, or we would just not do that part and save money.
Mhm.
So
Okay, how does that align also with the 6th East north of 2500 North?
Yeah.
Like, is that going to be kind of coincident with that?
with the construction process
Yeah.
of it, so no. From 2500 north to the city office to about right there. If you guys remember, we had that development agreement, the additional one where we would put in that portion. And then when Smiling H develops the north side, they would tie in from there up to the north road of 600 East.
And is that north side phase 2? I'm trying to remember.
Yes,
Okay.
phase 2. And that would just be dependent on when they came in and developed that. They
Right.
didn't put it, we haven't heard a time frame yet on that. They said fast, but we don't know.
Okay. Okay. I think unless there are more questions for Jordan, we'll open it up to public hearing, then we can have more discussion afterward. Okay, so we will open this up for a public hearing. The rules for public hearing are as follows. Before you begin, please state your name for the record, speak into the microphone so your comments can be recorded. Limit your statements to 2 minutes. If you're also speaking on behalf of others, you may ask the chairperson for more time. Please phrase your opinions in the form of statements, not questions. Please address your comments to the council, not to the public. In the future, note that if you have questions or need to discuss an issue, you may meet with the city council members or city staff member before the public hearing where dialogue can take place. You may provide a written statement as your input for a hearing. You may read your entire statement or summarize it. The 2-minute limit still applies. You may provide a copy of a written statement to the city recorder who will make copies for the city council. And the written statement will become a part of the public record, but will not be included in the minutes of the meeting. So with that, we'll open up the public hearing. Okay, seeing no comments, we will close that public hearing. Council, any questions that you have for Jordan?
I just
on
have
this?
one point of clarification.
Yeah.
So when you said that if the west side isn't if the west side isn't developed, that you'll do it on the east side. Okay.
Right.
I do have one concern because I know how many children walk on that. Will it be a straight line of sidewalk?
Yes, so
Okay.
the pathway on the east will finish all the way from 2200 to 25.
So they will
that
have
pathway will
100%.
Be in place 100%. Yep.
That's all I need to know.
So just on the portion, let's say we can't develop that section that's not being developed. Sorry, we can't improve that section that's not being developed other than the sidewalk and then that. How much width? So you said it was 20,
Yeah, so
22 feet?
and maybe to
in that
clarify, we own all the right of way of this
Right.
property, so we don't have to do any property acquisition. We don't have to go in and do any negotiations on that, but it's a 66-foot cross section is the entire road width. So those areas where we wouldn't have a full cross section. So if you go like 3100, you know how at the bottom, the north side, we haven't done full curb and gutter on it because we wait for that parcel to develop and then they would tie back into it. And so that's what we would do on those
Okay.
northern portions of that 6th East roadway. Because as a development comes in, they're responsible for their frontages. And the COG doesn't like if we spend money to provide opportunities for development, such as, like
Yeah,
covering their costs of development. So
that's a good example. I was trying to visualize how
yeah,
much width
so
the average
the
car
road
is
would be
going
straight. Yeah, so we would have, so on that unimproved, I'm sorry, I can't see it very well, but I think the narrowest it gets is a 22-foot roadway. So 22 foot with 11-foot travel lanes, that's outside of curb and gutter, would be the most narrow section it would get in areas where there's no development on either side of the road. And that's only one little section. And that would be one of those areas where we're working with the property owner to see if they'd want to put in the improvements now, just because it'd be cheaper to do it with us than later.
But in that event, let's say that they opt out,
Uh-huh.
they will be bound to
Yep.
do it.
Yeah. it'd be
That's,
part of their
that's
development.
set up. Okay.
Yep.
And
Okay.
what's the time frame?
Funding is in,
October.
Is when the applications are due, and then we would find out shortly after that, in the 2 months after that, which projects get funded. And it's just based off of the projects and how the mayors vote in that ranking.
So spring if we got approved.
yeah.
The what, sorry?
Spring if we got approved.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen until spring.
Yeah, if this was if we were fully approved and everything went smoothly, it'd be a spring project. Again, we don't have right of way, we don't have huge project or huge issues on this roadway, so it'd be a pretty smooth construction process.
Have you visited with the property owners with some of
Mhm.
them already?
Yes,
And are they feeling like they're open?
yeah,
Ready.
they've all known it's coming. It's just a matter of time, and they see the development going on to the north. So, yeah, I've had conversations with almost all of them now, and we'll continue that dialogue
And is that welcomed? I mean,
as much as it can be.
Okay.
Like, they know it's coming. They can see 60 East on the north and on the south. I mean, nobody likes the roadways to come in, but they know it's coming. So-
okay,
And there's not a huge property impact. As you look on 600 East, a lot of those properties were set back. So you can see where their driveways frontages are. So they knew this roadway was coming. It was just a matter of time.
okay.
So do they know that there's potential financial impact to them?
Yeah.
No, that's been
A
clarified.
few, this is only to a few of them that have.
Yeah.
that. So,
So not
those
every
ones we
home
reached
that's
out to.
on that road was
Right.
part of that agreement.
yeah, I reached
Okay.
out to the ones that I'm aware of. And so we'll keep digging to see if there's additional ones. Here's the Hansons.
Yeah.
They're affected on this.
I
roadway.
noticed that too, yeah.
Yep. So, yeah.
I'll motion that we approve the application for the COG funding for 600 East.
Okay, motion by Buzzy,
I'll second.
second by Joni, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion
Okay,
passes.
thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to consider approval of a city initiated general plan amendment intended to update and modify the North Logan City Roads Transportation Master Plan, which is an element of the city's 2013 general plan.
Hello, council. So what we're looking at here is an amendment to our existing general plan, our 2013 general plan. It's a minor amendment. It's cleanup in nature in preparation for our upcoming general plan rewrite. So just to kind of give a quick overview, what we're trying to do is we're trying to just make sure that our existing exhibits are up to date with what has been approved in the past via ordinance. So in our general plan in 2013, we adopted a transportation element. It's a chapter of the general plan, and inside of that element, there's a roads and transportation master plan exhibit. That is a guiding document for our master planned roads throughout town. Over the last several years, last 10 years, actually, there's been a couple of amendments to this exhibit that were passed via ordinance. But the city did not do a great job of updating this exhibit in the document itself. So what we are doing with this proposal is we're taking that older 2013 exhibit, updating the document to show those amendments that have been passed in previous ordinances, and then make a couple of clarifications or new amendments to help the document be a little bit more legible and then ready for analysis and reconsideration with the new general plan that will be in the next couple of months. So in the staff report, there's 3 exhibits, the first of which is just the 2013 plan as it existed when it was adopted. The second exhibit there, Exhibit B, highlighted in red are some of the amendments, actually all of the amendments that have been made since it was originally adopted, but just weren't updated on the exhibit graphically. So this is showing what has happened in the past. And then Exhibit C shows all of those amendments having been added to the exhibit, plus a couple of small adjustments we'd like to make in anticipation of our new general plan. You can see those highlighted there. Most of them are clarifying, for example, on the far west side, the train tracks. We're showing that the train tracks are continuing all the way to the south. Obviously, our full western border is bounded by that railroad track. The exhibit currently makes it look like the track just ends at 2500 north, which we know that it doesn't. So we're just clarifying that. We're making two connections highlighted in red as well. 2600 North, just west of Main Street, connecting that inner block where we don't have existing development blocking that connection. We've got a connection on 2200 North between Wolfpack Way and First East. And that's just to connect to that existing roadway. And then lastly, we're proposing adding a connection between 2300 North and 2600 North, between 12th East and 16th East. This is a larger block that doesn't have any inner block connectivity, and it's generally speaking undeveloped interior of that block. So adding that connection allows for better connectivity between those blocks and development opportunities inside of there. Other adjustments to this map, we've changed some symbology at intersections. If you want to hop back over to Exhibit B, you'll see at some of these intersections, there's a orange circle with an X. A lot of us thought that those were intersection. That symbol meant an intersection, but it doesn't. It means a change in road classification. So going from one color to the next, which was confusing. And so we opted to just get rid of those and say, look, it's clear that we're changing classification because the color has changed on the road. But what we're doing in the proposal with this amendment is changing it from those circles to what type of an intersection, whether it's just a traditional four-way, if it's an existing signal or a future proposed signal, or if it's an existing roundabout or a proposed future roundabout. So we're clarifying what those intersections are intended to be. But that's in a nutshell. We're just trying to clean this up because we're going to be looking at the entire general plan going forward. As we look into the future, the next 20 years, doing population projections, growth projections, this exhibit will be adjusted to accommodate what we envision as a community for growth in the new general plan. So we're bringing this up to speed. So we put a bow on it. It's existing, it's current, it's clear and legible. And then we'll analyze it and we'll rewrite it with the new general plan. Not much will really change with the new general plan, but there may be some changes in classifications based on future traffic that we anticipate on some of these connections. But for now, that's what's in this proposal. You
So
guys have
that
any
was going to be my
questions?
question is, do you anticipate this changing? Like, is there any chance that this changes with the
With the
general plan?
No, not necessarily. As you'll notice, most of these lines are solid lines. The dashed lines are future potential lines that haven't yet been constructed. I imagine those will likely stay the same. We may see some changing in colors with the new general plan if we need to up the classification for the anticipated traffic, depending on where density goes and where it's envisioned with the general plan. But by and large, it's not going to change much. I do hope that we can maybe make it a little bit prettier, a little bit easier to read, maybe actually have a graphic artist put this together for us. It'll communicate the same information, but maybe just a little bit easier to read, a little more legible is my hope. But there will be changes with the general plan.
How much of the updates did you do to this map that are actual existing roads?
None of these are existing roads, so they're all dashed. So if you
Okay.
see in this is the third exhibit, what we're proposing. These are future roadway and they're dashed lines, so they're not existing.
Okay.
Actually, this one on
Yeah, that's-
22 is existing. It's
Oh,
just
yeah,
a
that's
change
right.
in the classification of the road.
That's right. Yeah. So this is part of the city center.
That was a quiz, Scott.
I failed.
You did.
Must have to go to Les Schwab.
Quiz. Yeah.
Flat tires.
Yeah, if you recollect, the city center ordinance calls for a specific road cross section on 2200 North for more pedestrian connectivity. So previously that was a green segment and now we're changing it to orange to just denote that that is part of the city center and that has a specific road cross section that differs from a traditional 66-foot right of way.
Okay. Other questions?
Yeah, so 1400 East is maybe catching me a little off guard, Scott. So what's without that line there currently? What is that all that undeveloped?
The majority of the inner block is mostly undeveloped. You have development along the frontages of I call them the super block, 2300 North, 12th East, 16th
Do you have the
East.
GIS up or no?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just curious, did we talk to any of the property owners there or before we throw a road through that section of?
Not necessarily. And the reason being is because we know that that road will have to occur if that area is to be developed, regardless if it's on the master plan or not. So if-
To correct that, we did this one, and it was probably for the city council, this portion through here. it was intended to have a road through there. And so when they came through and they actually started doing their development, part of the agreement was they had to install a portion of that subdivision, part of that roadway. But then it's basically being codified right here, but it was only this portion right here that was in discussion.
So that's, even though it's not showing on that map, that exists today, obviously, but.
They have to put it in as in conjunction with this subdivision or this home that was going in. Because they needed access, they needed fire code. They had to meet fire code with the fire hydrant that would go in on that road. And having a fire hydrant on that road, we needed a roadway going into that. And so that was a discussion up to this point. But normally your master plan roads don't just go a short portion and then terminate, they tie into a
connect.
logical termini is what the COG always calls it, sorry, the CMPO.
And is that the, like going north on that, is the understanding that when the Phillips subdivision comes in, that will also punch through to 31? Is that, it's been a long time since we discussed that, but like, so north of this, just where it dead ends.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess through that portion as well.
Yeah, Phillips ties this straight through.
It does.
And then what about,
South of there.
yeah, what about south of
So
that?
not the proposal doesn't connect north of 2,500 because we have existing development along 2,700 that would block that. It could connect. There might be an opportunity to squeeze a road through, but we'd probably have to take a home to make it happen. Is that property right there?
So I have a similar
00174.
question. Is there an impetus to make that brief segment? Like, what's the thought process behind it to put that brief segment in?
So the thought process is we've got, if you look between the mid-block section, there's not really a connected roadway through. And we know that 2,500 eventually will make its way through based on the existing alignment on the master plan. But that whole undeveloped area, mid-block, is landlocked and inaccessible.
Is that 01010, Scott? Is that what you're talking about?
1004, yep, up in that, all those rear portions of
And
property.
2,500 wouldn't.
It could,
those
so
properties.
it kind of clips the upper portion, but for anything south of that to be developed, a road would need to connect through. And if
Okay.
it's not master planned, we're kind of stuck on that 750 cap on distance. So
Oh,
some of that inner area just wouldn't be within that distance unless it's master
'Cause there
plan,
would
then
be
we
a
can
future
extend it
plan.
through.
That's
Uh-huh.
right.
and is the hesitation to do that entire segment that there are existing homes?
There's an existing home there, so it would almost be like we're planning to take that home at some point, which isn't necessarily the case. If development, were to occur and maybe that landowner owns some land behind them and they were to volunteer to do that, it would make it easier, but the distance isn't as great either from 2,500 up to 2,700.
Oh, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That, given the 750 rule, that those parcels are currently landlocked, so I can
Yeah.
understand.
And I do anticipate with our future general plan that we're going to look at some of these bigger blocks and the undeveloped areas behind that are kind of just underutilized areas. And how do we get good connectivity into and out of those areas? We may add some more of these as we go through. We knew this one was kind of a low hanging fruit because of the distance, because of the large undeveloped area mid-block, but also because of that initial stub that we have off
So-
of 22.
So the practical effect of making it a master plan road, what is the implication for, say, like the owner of that parcel ending in 10?
In 10, just up above.
I mean, I'm just picking that at random, but
Yeah, I mean, so they have access off of 2440 and they could pull access through. But that is not a master plan road, the 2440. And so there is a limit on the distance, which it might already be capped at the 750. But it might open up opportunity for them to have a secondary point of egress along that master plan route to the south at some point, if they were to work with those landowners.
and is that triggered by development then?
It would
The
be.
master plan road?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
so
we-
it really just is a placeholder in the event that the development occurs.
Yeah, and it kind of just guides the discussion when a proposal is, maybe submitted in this area, we can glean from that master plan road to say, we've already anticipated this location as being where it should be. And that kind of helps those conversations as far as exactions during a subdivision process. It also helps us with, applications for regional funding through like the COG or other organizations where it's a master plan road. And so it could potentially qualify for some of that funding.
And so remind me, that is what's in place now, is that as long as there's a future termination to another master road, 750 is exempted.
Correct. Well,
Okay.
it is up
It's
to 30
extended.
homes.
Sorry, without the home condition, right?
Yep, as long as it follows that trajectory and we have an anticipated point where it will tie back in.
So for any developer, this is actually going to be beneficial. We have that on the.
Kind of an
It opens up
incentive.
opportunity. Yeah, yeah, an anticipated, where we know what to expect if that were to occur.
Or I
Yeah.
should say any property owner that wants to sell and develop, I guess.
Them as well.
When do you anticipate starting this and then what does it look like for the committee? If people wanted to get on the committee?
We're talking about the general plan
General
amendment.
plan. So the general plan, so this is a good point to give you an update. This past week, UDOT did approve our scope of work. And because they are the granting authority of our funding, they have to be the ones to oversee the scope, making sure our scope matches our original application for the funds. So now that the scope has been finalized, we can bake that into our RFP, which will go out for potential consultants to bid on and actually help us with that work. So my to-do items in the next week or two is to get that RFP wrapped up with that scope having been approved and then get it advertised. We'll probably keep it advertised 30 to 45 days or so. And then we'll have to do a selection process for a consultant. Once we have a consultant on board, then we can start working on a schedule. We can start scheduling public hearings, discussions, data collection, and then really get into the weeds with figuring out what the community wants to do, over the next 10 to 20 years.
I'm assuming that that process of getting input from the community, that will be overseen by the contractor. It's not necessarily a city driven thing.
It'll be definitely guided by the city through the planning
Sure.
commission. So state code requires that the planning commission provide a recommendation on any general plan. So it goes through the planning commission before it comes to city council, but we'll most likely have joint work sessions between planning commission, city council, just so you're not seeing the final product at the very end of the process. It is a lengthy process. There's a lot of details, a lot of different sections that are required by code. But we'll work through that with various open houses and public comment periods to craft each section, a lot of public hearings as well. So the answer is soonish. We were waiting on UDOT to give us that final nod to make sure we were good to move forward in the direction we had proposed. And now that we are, we can go out to bid and get a contractor on board. And
And
we'll start forming committees.
Typically, how long will that take to get to the point where you award the bid?
So we have to advertise it just to generate interest, get people's eyes on it. They need to draft their proposals, get it submitted to us. We have to go through a selection process, a review and selection process. And then we can award that to them.
You're talking months?
It could be a month or two
Okay.
after the bid closes, before we have that figured out, and then jump into it.
Okay.
Yeah, these things just take time.
Any other questions for Scott on this? Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion to approve the general plan amendment.
I'll motion that we approve the city initiated general plan amendment.
Okay, motion by Joni,
Second.
second by Emily, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
That passes unanimously. All right, next is consider the authorization of the signing of franchise agreements for the installation of small sections of fiber communication lines within North Logan City. Who's taking this one?
I can start out. With this franchise agreement, this was kind of a discussion between probably two different fiber providers. We actually have six talking with the city right now, 6 different companies regarding fiber. This one's more catered towards Utopia. We've met with Utopia about 5 or 6 times in the last, I'd say 5 years. Originally, Utopia was in discussions with the city regarding a citywide installation, which was more of a bonding intent at that time, where the city would be an owner of the infrastructure once installed. And at that time, I think the city council was a little uneasy, even though it did sound good, working with Utopia, trying to get fiber throughout the entire city. Since then, this is a recent request, and it was primarily for 3 or 4 sections in the industrial area of the city to come in and install fiber in that area from Utopia. We received communication today that actually it'd be more of a citywide franchise agreement. But with that modification, there'd be slight changes to the way this is written. And so what I'm getting at is this sort of agreement that you're seeing here what we'd like to do and what I would propose is, yes, Utopia has several contracts coming up, so we need to be sensitive to that, making sure that we're not delaying that in any way, shape, or form. But at the same token, if we do make minor modifications to this to cater towards more of a citywide discussion for franchise agreement, we probably needed to run that past the city legal counsel, then the city council for approval. And so we do have representation here from Utopia. Jeff is his name. And so if you have any other questions.
So council, it's good to be in front of the mayor, council, and you just esteemed staff. I got involved late in just this discussion to review over the franchise agreement because we do a lot of these with the cities across the state for that very reason, not in the cities necessarily where we put in a whole system, but it's for usually for businesses that need it individually and they want to be able to have it in and then have their choice of internet provider since we're an open source company or UEN. So the Utah Education Network, we win a number of those projects every year and we need to put them in. And so we try to comply with whatever the cities are doing with what they want. In speaking with Alan, and by the way, until we started the meeting, I assumed that Alan was the city attorney here, given what my engineer had told me.
Esquire.
Yeah, and so let me just tell you, Ed, as someone, so I recently moved back to Northern Utah. I was raised here, went to college here. Then I practiced law for the last 25 years in Southern Utah, representing cities for 25 years. Cities, but not the big cities. So we didn't represent St. George. We were the satellite cities, and the dynamics certainly are different when that's the case. But I've attended probably 2,000 public meetings, and I was telling Alan, I kind of miss this, because for the last 8 months, I haven't been to a city council or planning commission meeting every single week or twice a week for the last 25 years. So having said that, I actually enjoy watching this and seeing how this works because, again, this is where I still think our great experiment works the best at this local level. As I read this franchise agreement, I got to tell you, and again, that's why I thought Alan was an attorney because it's written so one-sided for the city. As a former city attorney, I really respected how blatantly sided it was for the city, and I got to tell you, I appreciate that. We're a governmental entity, so we, even if it's difficult for us to accept, they're written well for protection of the city. So certainly what we wanted this for was for the few handful of businesses that have requested it for months now to have fiber to their projects, to their businesses. And franchise agreement, and by the way, I think Alan redrafted this from your power franchise agreement, and he did a great job. We don't need it citywide, but that's kind of what a lot of cities do anytime you put any infrastructure in. All the protections I can even think of, any other franchise agreements ever requested are in here, including financial reviews of it, even though it's going to maybe be to a few businesses only. And I would like to suggest, and I suggest it only because I certainly respect Alan's wanting you all not to feel uncomfortable in some way, that Utopia is willing. I mean, it's already one-sided enough. He can put in what he wants that might make it even more beneficial to the city. We'll accept that willingly because that's going to be what your standards are. And we assume if any other providers come in to just come to businesses, you'll have the same thing. The fact that it's in a franchise agreement already may set the basis for it, but we'll still have to bring in a request for a permit for every new business we go into. We're going to have to come in for a permit. We're going to have to go through the engineering on it. If there's bonding requirements for completions, I don't know if that's, you have that here for just individualized infrastructure, but we'll accept whatever comes out of it. It seems to be such a sensitive area in the state of Utah. fiber optics coming in, but we don't sell the service. We just provide the optics. They can pick who they want to serve and provide to them. And we'll comply with whatever it is. Having said that, I would suggest, if there's any changes that Alan feels like might make it more focused on what he thought we'd be doing at first. We're happy to have it be subject to that, but can't be substantive in nature. So having said that, I can't imagine what else it would be in there that would be more really favorable to the city, but we'd be willing to do that. We hate letting businesses kind of hang there like that. And they're in your city, and they've probably chosen well up here. By the way, I went to Utah State for 4 years, and all of my children came here. None of us ever got to be here in the summertime. So for the last 25 years, my kids come back home to St. George for the summer. I always had to go back to Davis County for the summer. And I always thought that would be my dream, to live a summer in Logan, because it is so much cooler and frankly more green.
Yeah, you'd be in good company. So I guess my concern is that I think that this would be considered a material change to the contract where the city is kind of planning this. We've run it by our legal counsel and Alan, our legal counsel assistant. We've run it with them considering those limited sections. I don't want to guess at what the revisions might be for the whole city, but I think this is a material change in the contract that we've seen. And so I would suggest that perhaps maybe we leave the door open for having a citywide contract that is negotiated by the attorneys. But I'm a little bit reluctant to just last minute say, let's expand it. I'm sensitive to the fact that you have some time crunches here. And so I think we could do it one of two ways, where you either pass it as it was. Does that document still exist? Is that what it is right now?
That's what it is right now. It's based off of the smaller segments in the city.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just a comfort thing. I want to do it on a handshake, but I'm concerned that if we do that we may be having some oversight.
Yeah, I don't want.
Yeah.
Again,
So, I mean, so that would be my preference, is to say, and you can choose, do we wait until we have a citywide agreement approved, like by both parties,
Right.
and then pass it? Or do we do what we have and what we've discussed?
it'll
in the
be limited
past?
to
Limited to those sections, but then you can come back and do a broader one.
from my perspective, as I understand it, and again, the engineers sometimes don't like to share this stuff because we're attorneys, we're just work makers, we're not really work reducers, I think. So fair enough. Having said that, I think it's more important to us that the businesses just get it in. I mean, doesn't make or break us in any way. Anytime we have more fiber anywhere in the state, it gives a redundancy possibility. So somebody just doesn't cut a line and doesn't cut off everybody in Tremont, for example. I think we'd be willing just to have this apply for the 3 or 4 sections. I mean, I think we've submitted those already, and that we just comply with everything right now would be for permitting for it, which probably is administrative, I'm guessing, for those types of permits. And we'll go on to finish this, because I'm telling you, you have a very good standard for a franchise agreement right now. I have 6 or 7 in my briefcase right now with different cities, and they're just really all over the place, just very well focused. So
Okay.
we'd be certainly willing to do that, Alan, to the extent it's only limited to those 3 or 4 sections, because
Yeah, and Jordan, I may need to ask you, my understanding is they're in the industrial area, which might actually encroach more into the general commercial area. But a way to limit that down, if you are looking at that option, the city council and the mayor, is more, you could even say west of Main Street at this time. So if you just limit it to west of Main Street, I don't think.
say it again.
That might be the case if you're doing a UEN contract.
I don't know if we have a UEN one to there. That's often what we do have, though. And sometimes the franchise agreements stop us and somebody else has to come in and put it in because we can't get it through just franchises, because everybody's skittish about it right now, I think. So I'm not absolutely sure.
I guess I just don't want to put the cart before the horse, so to
Sure.
speak. Where we're approving a document that we don't really necessarily have nailed down.
And you'll want to use it for because you want to use it for whoever comes in here.
Mhm.
So if Google, flows over from Logan and wants it in here, they can do that. The one nice thing about our process is, even if it's for those limited areas, though, we don't micro trench any of your streets. I mean, we bore down and then we laterally drill to put the conduits in, because we all hate what happens when roads get torn up every
Okay.
year by those things.
So the action that we're considering today is authorizing the city to sign a franchise agreement, which isn't solidified as of right now. So it would, and I think that maybe that's something to ask the council to say, are you comfortable having that open-ended of a authorization, given that the nature of this has changed?
We meet the 26th, don't we? We didn't take that week off.
No, we have one city
We
council
only have
meeting this
city
month.
council meeting in July, so we meet on the 2nd of August, I think is the next
Yeah.
meeting.
I don't,
As I think every city in Utah does. When
So we moved it to
council
that
member,
first week.
when council meeting.
The
in
what?
Last
July.
Wednesday, that month.
The first Wednesday, yeah, August.
Council, where are you on this? Like, what's your comfort level?
it feels too open-ended for me personally.
I guess I'm kind of confused too. Can you tell me the difference
Well,
about 5G and what we're considering now?
Which, did you say 5G?
Mhm.
You
so
need to
this is
understand, I'm
fiber underground.
Five.
Right. Well, I know that, but I'm saying,
it's
so,
fifth generation with what 5G is. G always stands for generation. Folks usually think of it as being bandwidth.
So
but
these are just tiny trenches in the
Yeah, I
ground
mean,
in the city
the
right of
fiber
way.
lines themselves are relatively small, but
I've heard pencil, like that's
Yeah.
about the width.
well, that's
conduit's
with,
wider,
with
though.
some of the, but there's more than one fiber in there. So
Got
I
it.
mean, so you're not just wasting out one, but I mean, it's the smallest of the conduits you probably have in any of your streets anywhere.
Right.
Where do you terminate? So where's the termination points outside the city boundaries?
I think, so we have, again, you're asking the least nerdiest guy at that entire company. When I started there, literally, the next youngest guy was 20 years younger. Next oldest person was 20 years younger than me. Having said that, we have backbone, which basically is what Utopia does. It provides a backbone to get fiber throughout the state, make sure we have redundancy. So we have it all the way through Tremont, and it goes through Brigham City, Tremont, and on up. So we have it coming up this way for the backbone. And Sardine Canyon is one where you work with UDOT and others to get it up there. But we're here, but it wouldn't take much to get it to the businesses we're at, where it's
Yeah.
at.
I would say, I mean, I don't, it's not the right time to sign. I think 3 weeks is okay, but if there's any nervousness, I've dealt with, this is a good thing for the businesses in the city and even potentially homes in the future, maybe not likely, but we are pretty strapped in this valley for service providers. So I think I think it's beneficial certainly to our businesses. It's just, I don't think this document's quite there. I'm with Emily and.
For the
Mayor.
franchise
Just hope
agreement,
it
and-
works,
and-
yeah.
So
then-
let me throw this out. We would be willing to say, whatever changes you make to it, we'll be subject to it. We could draft that in, easily enough that if in the next 12 months, 2 years, you have because the franchise agreement has to be the same with everyone. But having said that, if we could still approach the other businesses though, I mean, my engineer didn't talk to me about that, but I know that's the real primary drive here, is that our businesses don't lose it. So is that an administrative approval process for our public works and city administrator / city attorney?
That would be the encroachment process. They'd come in and fill out an encroachment permit for each one, but we probably wouldn't execute an encroachment permit until the franchise agreement is in place. That's the tough aspect there.
I mean, it would
I
be,
think the options in front of you are either these are just options on the table, and there's probably a myriad of other options. But it's either want to approve it as is, and which leaves some uncertainty in there that things could come throughout the entire city. Great. Another option is to approve it with a limited area. Just the ones we've talked about here. I know for certain it's in the industrial area and west of Main Street. It could potentially go over to the high school, which would be second east. Another option would just be we go through, we make those changes that cater it, which would be there's 4 or 5 changes we'd have to go through and make. but that would cater it towards the entire city, run those past legal counsel, have this ready to be approved by that August 2nd meeting. That would be 2 or 3 options that you have on the table.
Is that when your next meeting is, August 2nd?
Yeah,
I'd recommend we wait till August 2nd.
Yeah, I would much prefer that.
I'm reluctant on behalf of your client to say we'll put whatever we want in an agreement that you're bound to sign. So
But we'll have to anyway. I mean, let's face it, we'll have to agree to whatever you have for franchise agreement anyway. So be well assured you're in good hands. I can tell you that much.
okay,
Do you need official motion?
yeah, I think that, yeah, that's probably the appropriate motion is to table it to the August 2nd meeting.
So I'll just move that we table the franchise agreement with Utopia Fiber to the August 2nd meeting.
Okay, and then we'll make,
Consideration of-
oh, sorry, motion by Buzzy,
Second,
second by Emily, all in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Okay, and we're sensitive to the timing of this, so we'll commit to you that we'll work in earnest to get to an agreement that, you know, that you're looking for.
Well, I don't think we doubt that. Had it not come up today, I don't think this would have been an issue.
Yeah,
I didn't
And I think
even
that's. what's
realize
put
it
me in
was
my
before that.
notes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
But
okay.
so you're saying that there isn't either just a separate permitting process you can go through to put in that kind of a limited area?
No, we haven't
Because
done
if there
that in
was,
the
I guess it wouldn't
past.
matter anyway. But I guess if it was administrative, you would be able to maybe.
Yeah, we normally have those franchise agreements in place that just
And
provide all
then
the
the
guidance and
permitting.
protection, and
Okay.
it gives us the process at that point.
Okay. Well,
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you. I
Kingy.
appreciate it.
Starkey,
Mayor.
sorry. Okay. If we could, I would need a 5-minute recess. I am so sorry. I never do this, or I can sneak out. I did. What is,
5-minute recess.
Don't look at me.
what's the custom is what I'm trying to figure out. Anyway, so we will take a brief recess.
5-minute recess or?
Yeah.
Yeah,
you Just do it.
Make it 2.5, make a rush.
okay, 2.5. All in favor?
I.
Any opposed? Can someone else accompany me just?
Wasn't forward facing.
Yes.
What's the difference between?
So big them off.
Trying to space, I'm like, okay.
Easier for eyes.
Oh.
You know who's
That makes sense. Like your phone.
Oh.
So I think.
Are you, living around? I gotta see if it's better.
I was on.
We used,
I'm getting them.
Yeah, that was. Did you even wash your hands?
Smell them.
I believe you. See you, Craig. Good luck.
Craig, okay. Yeah, thanks for your best.
Well.
Okay, see you, Craig. Okay, we will go back on the record. Do we need to motion on that?
I see.
Okay, we will go back on the record. Thanks for indulging me. It was breaching emergency status, and we will also excuse Craig, who is continuing to recover from surgery. All right, we will move on to consider the authorization of retaining the city office construction manager general contractor for the construction of the community center library remodel. Alan, do you want to kind of give the background on this?
I can just give a quick overview on this. So the council are aware, when we first went out for bid on construction management and general contractor for the city offices, it was basically the civic center in its entirety, which would be the construction of the city offices, the library remodel and the construction of a community center, which would be an addition. And it also specified a children's library. So those are all specified in this contract that went out. We actually went out to this twice. We went through this process through our full bid process. I went out and received bids, interviewed many contractors. It was a good process though to go through that. And through that though, we created this document. These are the bid documents, and this is basically what we used. And in here, it basically says that we put an option in there. And we put this option in case we did not like the direction that the contractor was going. And so we put this in here so that as we complete the city offices and as we have that bond lined up for the community center, that we could opt out of that option. And right now it's kind of the stage where you can either opt out and we'd go to an open bid process for the community center, or we would continue on with the same general contractor. And I'll just say up to this point, this is just my personal opinion. I think the mayor could have another opinion, and others, the public works director, that have been involved in some of the construction aspects of this. Although from the get-go, what I did notice by going through this process, the CMGC process with this particular contractor, which Lundahl's was ultimately awarded the bid for the city office, they saved us approximately $2 million right off the bat. When we sat down with them and they went through every value engineering option, we saved $2 million. The other contractors we worked with, even in the bid documents, when we came back, we said, this is of value to the city. You need to come back with value engineering. No one could save us more than, I don't even know what it was, $50,000 total. And so you had a big disparity between the other contractors and what this contractor was able to provide. And then I think in general, the construction process has gone well. That's just my general feeling. I don't know, Mayor, if you have other input regarding the entire process that we.
Yeah, I'll just speak to that. It was a pretty frustrating process with the city offices because with our first CMGC, we'd stated that repeatedly. Look, we are not going, we have a set amount of money available to us because we're committed to doing it through the donation and not having that be a burden that the citizens incurred. And so we said that repeatedly. Look, we're, if it's 9 million, I believe is where it was at the peak of things, we're like, we can't do this project. We just stop it altogether. And as we talked to different contractors, we rebid it with that. Trying to remember, it was a hard cap. Fixed cost. And we were kind of blown off by several of the contractors. And then, like Alan said, Lundahl came in and they'd just done their homework, and that has continued to be the case as we've gone through this process, where they've been really thoughtful about ways that we can make this a reality. And I've been really impressed with them. And so I think this is a real opportunity for us to skip the part where people ignore our budget and say, we're used to working with bigger organizations that maybe have deeper pockets than they suggest. So I don't know that that's any new information adding to what Alan said, but they really kind of pulled it from the brink of not happening, in my opinion. So.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we bid it twice, I think is a really clear indication that maybe we should stick with this company. I don't know. I was not a part of the bidding. Who was a part of the bidding of that? Roger and city staff. And then I believe, Lloyd, were you a part of that? Okay. So it was a committee that interviewed the respective bidders. So, and I believe at the time we mentioned to everyone that was involved the possibility that this would be a bridge to the other project. So all of them knew.
It states that in the bid documents
Right.
as well. It says this is a potential project that would carry through to two other aspects of this.
Yeah, so I would strongly recommend this. Just given my involvement
A
in
couple of them didn't even come prepared. They were asked to bring value stuff of where they saw and they didn't even come prepared. And these guys, there's a couple of them that stood out that did and truly
Yeah.
said, this is what we see.
and it was frankly insulting. It
Yeah.
really was.
Okay, I'm motion that we approve or that we authorize retaining the current CDMGC for the extension of the property or the project.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Buzzy, second by Joni, all in favor?
I,
Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to consider authorizing the mayor to sign a modified construction agreement for the proposed Hyde Park roundabout at 3400 North and 16th East.
I'll go over this real quick. So as you're aware that we submitted with the COG with Hyde Park for the roundabout at 3400 and 16th East. So there's an agreement with Mr. Plowman there on 0003 in regards to how his property will be impacted. It's unique because he is a county resident and that parcel is in Cache County. And the only reason we have signature on this portion is because the curb line on the west side of the road is in North Logan City's right of way. And so Cache County has met with Mr. Plowman on the locations of the curb line as well as his access points out of his property and discharge and drainage from the subdivision above in Hyde Park onto his property. And so this agreement would be, the reason we would sign it is because the curb line is in North Logan City's right of way. So any questions, comments? It's kind of a random agreement, but that's what it is.
Okay, yeah, any questions? I'm familiar with this, so I don't have questions, but
That's it.
okay, then I would entertain that motion.
motion to approve or authorize the mayor to sign a modified construction agreement for the proposed Hyde Park roundabout at 3400 North, 1600 East.
Okay, motion by Emily,
Second.
second by Roger, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. All right, we'll move on to our final action item. Consider the approval of an agreement with Ronald and Delinda Marshall regarding public improvements to their properties located at approximately 2700 North and 1250 East.
I can start this off. If I need help though, Scott and Jordan can help me out. So this subdivision right here, this area of the city, sorry, this is 2700 North, 1250 East. This area right here is called the Krebs subdivision. They subdivided this property years ago. It was a very different way this went about. The subdivision that went through, basically, the developer gave the city a bond of sorts or payment. And that payment was intended to cover the costs of the construction and improvement. So the city did some of the work and they hired contractors to do the rest of the work. There was a lot of ambiguity though inside the agreement, but there was some certainty that basically says that the city was supposed to install this portion of the subdivision as well, which you know is unimproved completely. And so through that process, it wasn't an issue until recently when the Marshalls decided to build on 0002 as a lot. And as we were going through the process, we said, what do they need to do? I mean, as part of this, they're supposed to install the improvements on here, but digging through all the agreements, we came to find that the city's actually on the hook, at least for a portion or these improvements along the road. And so, as you saw with 600 East a minute ago, when Jordan got up and talked about each of those property negotiations along that section, some of them still somewhat in writing, some not. Some people remember one way, other people remember them another way. The reason we want to bring these types of agreements before the city council is so they're on the record of the city. And as we go through this process, there's a defined line of an agreement of what the city is going to do and what the owners and property owners will do. And what you're seeing here in this agreement is an attempt at that, where we sat down with the Marshalls and went through every aspect of this subdivision, the previous subdivision that's there. And this is an attempt to clean up each of those areas and basically state all the whereases that say why we're here in this boat, what that we're in, and then the understandings. What the property owner's responsibilities would be, which is the marshals, and what they'll have to do throughout this process. One of them is to complete a partial plat amendment that basically clarifies, because the property boundaries even have issues right now. Looking at them, they don't correspond with where they should actually be at this time. So that's moving properties around slightly, their boundaries, while still abiding. That's why it comes before the city council, abiding by the zoning. So you don't take them out of the zone that they're in or create new lots through that process. The city's responsibilities, as we go through here, it specifies how we are to go about this. Each little improvement, what we're supposed to do. Let me see if I can pull this up though. Exhibit C really details this. So we had this exhibit drawn up. It ties into the future North Logan Estates or Phillips subdivision to the north. So that was another component of this, how we tie it in. The previous subdivision agreement wasn't specific as to how this was to take place, where the road dedication would take place, all of these things. And so as you look at this, it basically specifies what would happen, and no agreement discussed this, but lot 1, that's this existing home, and how it would tie into lot 2 that goes up through here. And you can see there's kind of a transition here, where it goes from, if you can see here, the curb, there's high back curb, which is a fancy way of saying regular curb that you see everywhere, and then sidewalk. That carries around the corner in this, gets to this point, and then it transitions to what this cross section would look like, with a low impact swale, a flat curb, and then tying into a sidewalk. And this is kind of what I call making lemonade out of lemons. That's what we're attempting to do with each one of the parties here. But this agreement attempts to specify, both in written form and in this exhibit, exactly what would take place and when. The trigger for all of these things needing to be installed would be when this subdivision goes in. The city could do it at any time before then, but at that time, it kind of binds the city to install all of these at that time. That these improvements go in, thus tying in this sidewalk all the way into this logical termini, which would be 2700 north, and wrapping that around the corner, which goes all the way up to 16th east at that point. So we've gone back and forth. We've looked at this. We went over it this past week. Went over again today with the marshals. They brought up several concerns where we've made those corrections. They caught several things that we should have had in the agreement, and so we've added those to the agreement. And that's what you're seeing right now. But this is an attempt to basically clarify. So I need it to be clear to the council, clear to everyone involved, that this is what's going forward. This will be on the records of the city, and we'll have this indefinitely as to who does what and when.
Well, kudos, because I agree, it's kind of a tricky situation to really delineate at this point. So I think in the long term, this will ultimately be a good thing for everyone involved.
Did this give them their occupancy they needed then? Or?
Yeah, that was a condition of it. But normally we have to hold occupancy until they get curb, gutter, and sidewalk in, because it's normally a responsibility of the developer and or the property owner when they come in and do these things. What that does, because of the uncertainty, and they are basically ready to move in, is that once they can fulfill certain requirements within that agreement, then they would just get their occupancy permit at that time.
Is vinyl on item number 1, that the vinyl that blinds right there when you come down and have to make a left on a 1250? So that'll finally be removed in this agreement?
It would be moved slightly
Inside to stop that, because that is a bad view right there. Like if you're trying to see oncoming traffic, is that the intent?
which is really tough. Yes, that's part of the intent. However, it's more just to have it out of the right of way. The city's right of way actually goes a little bit farther than that vinyl fence into the property currently. But we're trying to again line it up so it goes into that property. The difficult aspect with that though is it doesn't fall within the site triangle.
That's what I was going to ask you, because the site triangle has code that reduces that to 4 feet.
Yes,
Okay.
but that one's back behind that. It's 50 feet off the intersection. So if you have 50 feet, they're not in that. It's just a horrible scenario though of just sight.
When you look,
see.
I mean, when you looked at it, does that shifting that far, does it give it enough line of sight in your opinion?
A tiny bit more, but yeah, this is something that we couldn't correct because that's not within our, they abide by the current site triangle.
Gotcha.
Unless we wanted to change the site triangle in the future, they're fully
Maybe
compliant
grandfathered.
with that, although seems unsafe. right now, as Buzzy brought up. I've noticed that, everyone's noticed that driving up to that intersection.
Any other questions on this?
No, that's a good question.
Okay. Okay, then I would accept a motion to approve this agreement.
Make a motion that we approve the agreement between Ronald and Linda Marshall regarding the public improvements, their parcels listed on the agenda.
Okay, motion by Roger,
Second.
second by Emily, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Chief, we'll get you up here and out of here, but Chief is going to speak to updates regarding the newly approved code enforcement officer position with the MPPA.
Right, this is a much anticipated position. There's a lot of interest from the public, from both North Logan City and from Hyde Park residents that want an officer that can come out and help to enforce the city laws, the ordinances, the codes, regulations that are related to the nuisance properties, abandoned vehicles, weeds, other nuisances. And as that person gets more and more familiar and trained in the actual code, we can have them help start helping out with a little more complicated issues, encroachment issues, and some of the rare properties where we've built up this huge, big case with them. Those type of cases are going to be rare and few between. But what we're asking or looking for them to do and having oversight of, first off, we want them to be recognized as a code enforcement officer and not a police officer. And so we're going to have a uniform for them. We have this hat, the North Park Police. We would have a similar type hat that would say North Park Code Enforcement on it. They would be in a uniform, a gray pant, and either a blue polo or a black polo that would have that same logo that said North Park Code Enforcement. We'd also issue a badge ID. That way the public, when they are making contact, they have a little more confidence that this is an actual person and not just somebody that's coming up to kind of harass them or give them some problems. Ideally, our ideal candidate or person for that position is somebody who's not necessarily right out of high school or college, somebody who is not looking to start their career, but somebody that's a little more seasoned, perhaps retired and looking to help the city and looking for a little extra income. 20 hours a week is what we're planning on right now and what we've prepared for. We anticipate that they will be in a vehicle with that same type of logo on it, with the vinyl sticker. That's not an expensive thing that we can do. As part of that process, what we're anticipating to begin with is that this officer will be responding to mostly complaint-driven type of calls as they come into either North Logan City or to Hyde Park or to Scott or Allen or Marcus there. The code enforcement officer will be made aware of that. They'll go out, they'll make contact with the owner there, kind of look and see what the problem is. If it's a weed issue, there's noxious weeds that they haven't taken care of forever, and make initial contact. We'll have a shared drive folder that North Logan City can see and Hyde Park City can see, and they'll begin following that administrative process of making contact, making the owner aware of the particular city ordinance that needs to be enforced, needs to change on their property. And then if that is resolved with just that talk, that's great. And if not, then they can start with the template letters of you're in violation of this property, you haven't this much time, to correct that and to change that. And that's all based upon what's written in our city ordinances right now. If that doesn't change, then they will have the ability to deliver a citation. And part of that process, they'll have to have their reports dictated or not dictated, but done in Spillman so that we have access to that the judges will have access to that and so forth. We're hoping that this officer, again, can have that good communication skill and go up and just talk first and get the compliance from the homeowners and help solve a lot of these issues that we're having. We've had a lot of people who've called in and said, we've had this abandoned property and I'm worried that the kids are going to go in and can I just go buy some boards and board it up? And we're like, no, it's not your property. You're not allowed to do that. So we're hoping that we can solve a lot of these type of problems and make life a little better for the citizens who are asking for this type of work.
Yeah, and I'll just add that a lot of the input that I've gotten recently in the form of complaints have been things like this that don't fit perfectly with the police department's jurisdiction or staffs. And so this is kind of an effort to have a dedicated person that responds to those kinds of issues, hopefully before it escalates. Because I think a lot of times my experience is that when there is an issue, it's a lot of times just having a conversation and just saying, bringing it to people's attention. But I think also it's reflective of the feedback that we got from the city survey, that these are the kinds of things that really bug people, for lack of a better word. So,
Yep, exactly.
any questions for Chief on this?
I know maybe playing off the discussions in police commission, we had it. I see a similar position with what the University of Utah State's done with, it's a little bit different in security. But the fact that you now see security directing traffic at the game now frees officers to focus on more important. I would suggest maybe as we're searching for this person, it may not hurt to talk to him and see there's more people, but you see them on the golf cart going to the poisonous lab and looking. So there might be some things to learn from them, and where you have contact to say, this is a little different, it's code enforcement. There's some similarities. What have you given them? Because they're the same thing. They have a uniform, and we could maybe glean something that we could, so we don't have the whole learning curve of a new position, is that thought. Because when I see those guys, I think kind of the same thing, but it's different, with the code. But
Yep, absolutely. Again, we're wanting the person, somebody that has a basic understanding of the codes and ordinances and how they work, as well as that presence of mind that this is how we're going to do this, but there's also a tactful way to go about that. And I think that's what the citizens are asking for as we do that.
Yeah.
What's the salary for this?
So right now we've identified a starting salary, part-time of 21 an hour.
Shared between the two cities.
Yep, shared between the two cities. This isn't just this or this. Or North Logan or Hyde
And
Park.
it's according to the formula used by the police
Yes,
department.
that's correct.
Would this be someone that also looks into dogs off of a leash?
Yes.
Okay.
All of those type of city ordinances. We have our animal control officer that is responding to those calls right now, but this person is one that we want to utilize the best that we can with either being cross-trained with the special functions so that they can do VIN inspections for citizens. Sometimes the police are busy with the calls and things, they're not able to do those, and so they wait for 2-3 hours until they're able. We're hoping that this person can respond to a multiple
Help alleviate
type
some of
things
that
and help
paperwork.
alleviate those.
Any other questions? Okay, then let's see, I guess this is just an update on this. There's no
Yep.
action item. And I've asked Chief, he has 2 city council meetings to attend tonight. So I'd have asked him to kind of just wrap his update into this.
Yep. As far as our update, first off, with the city celebration coming up, the police, we're going to have a police cadet obstacle course from 8 o'clock until 9 o'clock, just in conjunction with the movie that's being shown that evening. And we hope that'll be a lot of fun.
And that's on the 24th.
That's on the 24th. Yep. So we'll have that up and running, have that manned where the kids or the adults, if they want, can run through that and get their time, have their score on that. It should be a good event for them. Also with the parade that morning, we'll have our officers that are in it. But also with this new drone that we've got, we'd like to record that or a portion of that parade as it comes westbound down 2100 north there, so that we can put that up on the city website and in different places there. So
That's exciting. I'm excited for that.
that'll be a
That'll
good
be cool.
option for us.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Chief.
Okay, then we'll move on to discussion regarding potential tiered water rates for subdivisions and developments that were approved with the understanding that all exterior watering would take place utilizing only secondary irrigation water.
All right. This is one of the items from our Grower Smarter workshop that we identified as an area that we need to investigate. Right now, if you want to click on that copy of, that bottom one. Just kind of get us started. Basically, what we're looking into is through the last few years, we've had a lot of developments that as they come through city council have been approved for secondary water use on their exteriors, and specifically have been told that they are not allowed to use culinary water on landscapes. And so over the last few years, we've seen that some of those developments are abiding very well, and there are others that are not abiding very well. And so we've identified some of the developments that do have agreements in place, starting with, so this is going to be a pretty big process. This is just a workshop item, so we're not finalizing anything today, but just kind of give you a background on where we're headed on it. We would start with single family developments that have been done in the last few years that do have a solid agreement in place that either was recorded on their development agreement, even some of them are recorded on their plat, a note that says they can only use secondary water on exterior, and they are not allowed to use culinary water. The big reason for that is when the development was approved, we went through water models and studies to make sure that we could provide culinary waters to their homes, culinary water to their home for drinking and showering and any, basic indoor use. At that time, those developers stated that they would not use that on the exterior. And so they were approved with the lots and with densities that allowed for the water to be used interior and exterior water only secondary. So if they switch over to the culinary system, it puts a big strain on our system because it was not intended for those lots. So that was one of the areas we identified during our Grow Smart workshop, is to look into some of these developments to see if we could put an additional rate structure in place to help keep people on secondary water that are supposed to be on secondary water. A lot of times when they run into switching to culinary water, it's because the secondary water is dirty or they have water restrictions on the secondary system. And so if they switch to culinary and they're not in areas we know about, they'll just use the water freely. So that's only a few. I mean, we're talking about a small percentage of residents that do that, not the whole. So what we will do to begin is we would identify with the single family developments that we have records on plats or on deeds or on development agreements that say they can only use secondary water. And then if you scroll down, those are just a handful that we know off the top of our head. There's more that we need to investigate thoroughly. And then multifamily developments are the same. We have multiple throughout North Logan that were approved with only using secondary water outside. And so we've got to look into those ones as well to see if they are using it. And we need more information on the others. If you want to switch to the Excel sheet in there.
Jordan, do you mind just in those development agreements, does it specifically prohibit the transition to culinary?
So it doesn't say in there that you can't connect to it. It just says you cannot use culinary water on your landscape.
Exterior, okay.
So it explicitly actually says
Yeah.
that exterior use.
Is there a way that we can, I guess I'm confused as to why we would have the connection if they can't use it. If that
Because
makes sense.
people, if you moved into a new development, you wouldn't necessarily know that you couldn't use culinary water.
Yeah.
And so it's a very common practice for landscapers to tie your sprinkler system into a culinary system.
So,
There's backflow devices that have to be in place, and a swing joint is what you can use to go from secondary into culinary. So it's a physical disconnect between the two systems. But a lot of people don't know that, or if they moved in, or if they're having troubles with the secondary system, will switch to the culinary system because it's reliable. The water's clean and the water's got good pressure and it's always there. And so people will switch.
Well, what I'm saying though is like, if we're saying that they can't use it, why are we even allowing a switch?
We
Sorry,
don't
say
allow
the,
We don't even know.
they
what they're
just
doing.
do it.
oh, they're just.
It's up to them.
Okay,
So
there we
it's
go.
really hard to catch because it's in backyards. It's not like we can go and investigate every single parcel and see if they've done it. And so we don't allow them to do it. It's just sometimes we don't catch it because it's in private property. It's back under bushes. Like it's hard for us to.
But our metering will show it. That's what
So
you're getting.
Water
I mean,
use is what we
yeah.
find.
So it's really gonna be a
That's what-
marketing campaign because
You
I
s-
think
you
9 out of
still
10 homeowners
wonder.
probably don't even know
Yeah.
that they're doing
Yeah.
that. that
And
they're
so
bad. I
what we
hear
would do is we'd send letters, and we've done this to a couple subdivisions already west of Fourth East,
You did.
where we've sent letters to all the homeowners and said, hey, you cannot use culinary water on your landscape. It was prohibited in your development agreements and your HOA agreements. Everything says you can't. So we've sent some of those letters out and had people switch that didn't know. Some people told us, we don't care. We're going to stick with culinary because it's reliable. So
So also, I'm just like, just kind of to get to the foundation of this, I'm assuming that when we made those development agreements, it's because we have to consider the overall demand on our culinary water system. And so that's why those development agreements exist,
Yes.
because we're counting on them remaining on secondary to be
yes.
able to provide water for the entire city.
Yeah, for an example, a culinary home or somebody on culinary water, let's just take Buzzy's house, for example. He's in an area where he can't use secondary water. On the interior of his home, he uses between 3,000 to 8,000, depending on how much his family showers that given month.
Not much. I probably consider it less than that.
So in the winter time, you're around that 3 to 6, maybe in Buzzy's house, 3,000 to 1,000, but that's what you're using inside. And so in the summer months, he's using quite a bit more than that, like substantially more than that, probably 10 to 15 homes worth of that for interior. And so if you're to use water on your exterior, you're using a month's worth of interior water use for 15 homes. So it's huge. It's a huge impact. Dan Rogers' house is on secondary water. So his house, he's using around 5,000 gallons every month year round. And so if they switch, it has a huge impact on our system. And so when they're come through the development plan, we look at the water model to see if we can handle that impact. And most of the times it's, yes, we can handle your interior, but we cannot handle your exterior. So you have to use secondary. And so that's why in their development agreements and plats, it says you have to use secondary. Otherwise you cripple our culinary system. So yeah, that's kind of the foundation of it.
Okay, sorry, we keep interrupting.
No, you're good. And so, yeah, so we're just scratching the surface of this and trying to see how we can implement it. Starting to look into some tier structures on what we could do to kind of give you a buffer period in case people don't know. And then as their use increases, costs would increase as well. So we're just starting down this road of how we would implement it and what price structures would be. But just mostly want to give you an update on kind of where we're headed and why it's coming about. Most likely we'd come back in late fall, winter with kind of a full scale of to present to everybody to kind of get feedback on what you would like to see implemented. The best thing for water restrictions and rate changes and everything like that is to implement them in the winter so that we can have tons of education before sprinklers turn on. So
See, I know, I remember through the years as we've done these, I remember specific commenting that they're saying, well, we're going to go out and get some secondary shares and we're going to provide it. Do we know that in the ones we're listing, they for sure have access to it? Because
Yes.
sometimes they say they are,
Yes.
and then it gets built and they don't. It's almost like Murphy, you can't
Yep.
do it, but you can do it.
And that's one of the areas where we're kind of struggling is some of the older subdivisions where you look through some of like the 6th East area subdivisions where when they were built, they all had access to the secondary. And you can go through there and look and 95% have it, but there could be one that at the time didn't buy into the system and they don't have rights, they don't have shares. And so we've kind of got to identify all those and work through those. But the ones that are the easy low hanging fruit are the ones that when the development came in, like
They
Smiling
had
H, for
secondary
example,
water.
they had to prove their shares and they had to prove an irrigation system that they will install for it. And that each home would have 40 pounds of irrigation to their lawn. And so we have agreements like that with construction plans and everything like that. So those are the developments that we would, that are the really easy ones. So that's what we'd start with. And, this fall with the presentation on those. And then when we get into the nitty gritty of trying to identify lots, it gets a lot harder in those older
And that's
areas.
what I'm saying. I still remember because I know I've been to the Canal Board meetings.
Yeah.
And it's easy to sit in this meeting and say, the developer's going to tell you, oh, I can get those shares.
Yep.
Meanwhile, you go and anybody who has shares, my father-in-law is a farmer and he'll tell you that's like, those are death words, like if you're
Oh,
taking
yeah.
water.
Yes.
So you're going to find a little bit, it's harder.
Yep.
issue.
And with development now, you have to identify your shares, bring them in,
Okay.
show a will serve letter. If you remember through all this Smiling H, we made it prove that the canal system could do it, that they had the proper authorization, had the shares in place, that they could actually.
And hopefully as we come that far, some of those ones that were in the gray area before
Yeah.
they now have access or
Yeah.
whatever.
And we encourage a lot of those people. And through this, we'll be able to identify some of those lots that don't have it and try to help them connect to secondary systems. Because it's a huge benefit for us.
Oh, yeah.
So can you kind of walk us through the Excel one that you have?
Yeah.
Or am I jumping ahead?
No, that's
Okay.
where we're headed next. So this is a very rough stab at kind of what we would anticipate putting into place. That top section there, lines to lines 4 through 12 are the current rate structures that we have in the city for culinary water use for single family and institutional. Because we want to focus on that first, because when you get into multifamily, it gets, we'll just focus on this one for now. But those are our current rate structures. So 0 to 10,000, that's what we talked about, that standard indoor use, because if you have a lot of showers in the winter, whatever, that's kind of a typical indoor uses in that range. 10 to 30 is where you start to see some exterior use. 30,000 to 60,000, you're getting into like a quarter acre, a quarter acre to 10,000 square foot lot. That's exterior use between that 30, 60, and then 60 to 90, you're all the way up to a 1 acre lot. So that's using exterior water. So if you look down on the lower section on lines 20 through 22, those would be kind of a stab at what we would do with applying these this price structure to like a Smiling H development that has secondary water on the lot. So 0 to 10 would stay the same because that's your indoor standard typical use. 10 to 20, your rates would double up to that 335 per thousand. And that would kind of be a buffer zone of, hey, you went over, or, if you had something going on at your house, you had a leak, something like that, you could kind of catch into that buffer zone of you're not being hugely penalized, but it is a little bit of money to hopefully wake you up. And then if you're irrigating on your exterior, you'd be above that 20,000. And that would put them into a range where your rates would be pretty substantial, or your cost would be a little high, would be pretty substantial to where you would definitely be like, I've got to get back on the secondary system.
If someone had a leak, do you give them a grace?
Yes, so we have a leak forgiveness program, and we kind of talked about that last time. We do send letters, we notify people of leaks. If they come in or are actively working on fixing the leak, we work with them, our billing department works with them, our staff works with them to identify it. So yeah, we help out on leaks a lot because we don't want to waste water. They don't want to waste water. We don't want to bill them for that. So
Thanks.
we work on that a lot. So this is, like I said, our first kind of go at this. Any comments, questions, concerns?
I would just say that if you have, as the discussion goes, if you have somebody that, and we're talking a lot of the East Bench area, some people may look at that and go, I don't really care. But so obviously there's going to have to be some teeth where no, you can't do it, because some would say, well, I'd rather just pay the fee and I don't want to do it. So I mean, there's had to be kind of that hybrid.
Yeah, and that's where we're trying to get up in the upper end. And if we apply these rates in our system into our Cassell and to our software programs, we can make it so it would flag those lots that we're using higher than the allotted amounts, up into that 10 to 15. So it would alert us and put it on their bill. Hey, you're getting up into those higher tiers. You're on secondary water, start down the back or go into that secondary water instead of using culinary.
Do you anticipate in the event that we do implement this, is there an education component to it?
For
Like,
sure. Yep.
so we start with, hey, here's where you are,
Yep.
we give you time to kind of
Yeah,
figure
and
this
that's kind of
out.
what we would look at, kind of implementing this towards the winter months so that we could send this out to those developments that had agreed, show them some past bills, maybe send out past bills that they had in the summer before and say, this is what's coming. And then, as April, March start to come in and we start to see that exterior water use, we can notify them again, say, hey, just remember, please use your secondary because your culinary is really expensive. So we can definitely do a lot of research or outreach during that time.
Do you have a sense of how many people this would impact?
Pretty small.
Okay.
It sounds fairly insignificant, but as we get more and more developments on this, those numbers start to add up. And we do have some fairly good sized developments, multifamily, that have not switched over to secondary yet, even though they were bound to their development agreement to only use secondary. So those would make big impacts on our system.
So, and I think right now, a concern that we've had or like something that we've considered when we consider subdivisions that come in,
Mhm.
that's always one of the first questions that we ask is, do you have a secondary water source? And so we've approved these, recent ones on the basis of them not being dependent on our culinary water system for exterior watering. So I would love to have some teeth in that to say, it's not just a wink, wink, you'll be on secondary, right? That we actually are saying, no, really, in order to have a system that works for the entire city. We've
Yeah.
got to really have some teeth here.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's why it's a small percentage now that it could grow into a large percentage if we don't catch it early. Because we do have a lot of developments that just had come on in the last few years that haven't landscaped yet and are still growing. And so if we catch it early, we could stop some of those people from switching.
So you have Aspen Meadows on your questionable list. I remember from living there that there wasn't an option for secondary, and I don't
Yep.
think it was in the agreement.
Yeah,
But let's say that you find out that it actually was in the development agreement and no home there has secondary channel for their
we would
homes.
just
How would
try
we
to
handle
work
that?
with them and really just try. We've already met with Mitch a ton
you?
about how they have secondary, because it has a line through the center.
It does.
And they've
Is
looked
that,
at running it around the exterior. And so it's just, because some of these are old enough that they probably don't have like a legitimately tight development agreement that says you have to. And on stuff like that, we just try to work with them and encourage them, like, hey, what can the city do? What can we come out and help you with? Can we run a line down the backside? Can we do other things to help you?
Some more
Get something
carrot
back
on
to-
that
Yeah.
as
Oh,
the
yeah.
initial
Yep.
step, then.
Because we
stick.
don't know exactly what was in their development agreement yet until we go and flesh it out. And some of those were old enough, they probably don't have.
and they're still just on that one single meter, right? For that subdivision?
They are. Yep.
Oh, man.
Okay.
So yeah, the multifamily is a giant onion that we don't want to touch yet. So we're gonna start with the easy ones and then work it. So.
Blade, did you want to? Oh, whoops.
So, I just want to make sure, so this would only apply to homes that are in where they, when they built, development agreement was in place, already established, they knew what the rules were, and that's so the tier rate you're proposing would only apply to those areas that have development.
Correct.
Just want to make sure.
Yes, that is correct.
All right.
Did you have a question?
So Johnson Park area, we've got 76 users on our pipeline. You're not proposing a tier increase for those.
No, and like we said, it's only on development agreements. So if you want to highlight like one example, the most recent example would be like the Smiling H subdivision. So it was a newer subdivision that came in, and the requirement from city council was they could only have secondary water on their lawn. They could not irrigate landscaping with culinary water. So some of the older developments don't have those agreements because it was readily available. There was already stuff there, so they were already using it. Some people didn't tie in, but the majority of it. But this tiered structure would only apply to those that that went through city council with the understanding that it had to be.
This,
Down the road, you're not gonna say, we're gonna start doing everybody.
Is that?
Is that gonna be written down or just?
I don't know that we'd have
not-
the standing to do that.
this
Because
would, this would be one of those subdivisions, though, Johnson Park, which we're familiar with. Where it would be more of the carrot type option. This is just my opinion. We go through and look at it. This subdivision was approved with the understanding that they would use secondary water back in the day. But there's nothing really written down, and so it's unfair for the city to come in and expect that. There's no written agreement, the residents. Well, we have a. No, and so in the future, what it would be a carrot option where we'd say, how can we work with you? To make that happen, if that isn't the case, if people are using culinary throughout the subdivision, which I don't imagine there are a lot. But just see what we could do as a city to help out with that, because it really does alleviate the city quite considerably. Like Jordan said, the difference between one home and 15 homes is the difference of someone using culinary water. But there's no development agreement whatsoever. Johnson Park is a subdivision that was approved probably in the 60s, 70s. There is no development agreement there associated with that. So that's just my opinion. Yeah.
I think the distinction is that we're working with a developer agreement right now. So we're putting teeth into a written understanding, a binding document. Rather than just willy-nilly saying, if you have access to secondary, like I don't think the city has the ability to do that.
No, and the other point of clarification is like the city isn't in this for more money. It's just like our tiered water rates when we put those in for culinary throughout the city. The goal isn't to get more money, but we never cover the capital cost that we have to incur to put in improvements, reservoirs, wells. The goal is to limit use. So to have people reduce the amount of culinary water that they're using, which we have seen through the culinary tiered rates, that's the ultimate goal. The goal isn't just to line our pockets at that point, because it's a lose-lose at that point. We'd never get enough money to cover the capital improvements.
Does that help? Yeah. Clarify a little bit. Yeah, our goal is to target those developments that were agreed upon with the understanding.
Yeah.
So Jordan, is the kind of the next step, maybe getting more information on the rest?
Yes.
Okay.
Our goal is so what we would like to do is we go through each subdivision and find those agreements, whether it's on the plat or a development agreement, and solidify that it directly calls out they have to use culinary water or secondary water on the landscaping, so that it does have. Yeah, so it's very clear that was what was supposed to be done. So we'd flesh those out, and some of those other ones, we'd have to flesh them all out to identify exactly which ones were. And then coming into winter, we'd send out notifications to all the residents in those neighborhoods to say, hey, just so you know, this was part of your development agreement and the understanding of your lot. Because they should have been given that when they bought the lot. There, again, we're looking at newer stuff in the last 10 years. So 5 to 10 years is where we're really looking at those development agreements, but.
So I have a question, sorry. So if that was an agreement in writing, they probably had the shares. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, because
So-
they would have shares and have systems. So one example is like Ashley Court.
Yeah.
They have the shares. The system is installed, everything's there, and they just might not be using it
Okay.
because it's easier for them to use a secondary, even though it says on their plat and in their development agreement, they must use secondary and it's provided on their law.
Okay, and then we'll call it the carrot provision that Alan. And so using Aspen as an example, it's not, maybe, I don't think it's in the development agreement. Let's just say it's not hypothetically. If would be really beneficial to probably every one of those residents to actually be on secondary
Yeah,
versus culinary
I'm
for
sure they love
watering.
it.
They drop their price, but how do they would have to obtain those water shares to do
Yep.
that, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's
and
not
so that's
just gonna
something we
be-
have to identify is
Okay,
if they didn't have the water rights, then it's a whole nother.
okay.
The
Thanks,
shares,
Jordan.
then it's a whole nother ball of wax to try to identify if we can get them, if they can lease them, if they can buy them.
Okay.
So that's something we'd have to do with Carrot and try to help. So like an example is the church over here. They had shares in this middle canal, and with the whole city office or the twin ditch, with the whole city office complex, we helped run a line down to them to provide secondary water to that location. They had the shares, they just didn't have access to the line. So we're helping get something down there because it's alleviating our system huge. So.
And costs like that, just to bring it up, I mean, the cost of the carrot example is
Carrot provision.
the carrot provision.
TM.
It's really how we go about with a lot of the different subdivisions throughout the city is the carrot. There's no stick available. So what we do is we go through and you look at what it's costing for like a reservoir. It's over $1 per gallon. So most reservoirs, let's say our next one that we're looking at is 4 million gallons. You're looking at $5-6 million reservoir just to do that. Putting in $2 to $4, $5, $10,000 to help a subdivision put in a few lines that would alleviate hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gallons in a month. Really is a bigger return on investment for the city at that point.
Yeah, cool.
Okay.
So that's kind
I
of
like
where
this
we're headed.
as a first step. I really do.
Okay.
I'm really excited to see it. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you're being really mindful too of people by sending it out winter, getting them ready and
Yeah.
so
That's
good
our
communication.
So yeah, we'd come back in probably December-ish with a more identified list and kind of start working through it again, but with some more backbone. But I just wanted you to see kind of the
Yeah.
direction we're headed, get some feedback, but Sounds
Okay.
good.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
you bet.
Okay, we'll move on to, I think it's you.
I'm here again.
Tell us about
Hello.
capital improvement projects.
You bet.
With water.
Yeah, so we'll just start down the list. The 7, maybe I didn't rename the date. It's that one, 6/21. Our water master plan and model analysis is underway. What they're looking at is proofing our water model to identify our areas of need. Some of the things that they'll be doing in the study are identifying and proofing our water rights, our needs, budget analysis, timelines, and preparing packets for applications for grants and fundings so that we have a full packet to present for those. Well 5 is underway. We talked about, we met on site a week or so ago with all the contractors and subs on that. Water conservation plan, we're still on the 3-day a week. This is usually our peak demand week right before the 24th is usually when we peak between the 4th and the 24th. And so we're moving a lot of water currently. We're looking to stay on 3-day a week, but depending on how this weather continues to be high temps and depending on how water is used, it could go to the 2-day a week in August, but we're holding out hope that we stay on 3. The landscape exchange program, same thing. We're working towards that. The one thing that is interesting, we met with USU this week. USU, the mayor probably remembers, she met with up on campus with some of the administration there. We've met with a lot of their staff, and with the Innovation Campus, we met with them yesterday, and they're trying to do a feasibility study as well as identify locations for a possible well in the Innovation Campus area. And so that could be pretty promising on whether that goes through, it'll help alleviate our system and possibly even help add to our system. So that's something we're just starting down the road on that could come out very well.
That's great news.
Yeah, but that's about where we're at on water.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jordan.
Jordan.
All right, updates on Civic Center.
We've gone over this pretty much at length in this meeting, but right now we're going to some of the designs on the Civic Center. So the Community Center addition and finalizing some of the aspects. So the issuance of the bond will take place sometime in the winter or early spring for that portion of this project. But obviously we've gone over the city office construction, which is going along well right now. And those are the basic updates right now, unless the mayor has anything else.
No, I don't, just because I've been out of town, so.
But expect those designs or preliminary design work in the next probably 1 to 2 council meetings. You might see something.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to updates from city officers. Scott, nothing. Jordan, anything left unsaid? No. Marie?
Yeah. I can-
What's my deadline? Tomorrow?
Oh,
8:30.
I always do it like
Next Monday.
the first of the month, so. Okay. Alan?
Well, thanks to all the council members who participated today and the mayor and the streets department employee for an hour. And thanks to the streets department, and the other departments who are participating. I think they did a fantastic job. Really educational and informative from Colby. We went over several aspects about how the city has shifted to more of that maintenance aspect and surface treatment aspect, which we used to come to city council meetings and go over all the complete replacement road projects, which has really gone from 10 when I was first here, 10 or 12. And as Colby's taken over as a street superintendent, that has gone down to 1 to 2 or even less of those complete replacement projects. So the higher amount that we've spent on road surface treatments has that significantly reduced the streets department budget and demand, because we don't have those major complete road replacement projects prevalent throughout the entire city. So that's up to those departments and for everything that they've done the past several weeks. So they've been extremely busy. Employee party coming up the 17th. So just mark that on your calendar. If you haven't RSVP'd to Marie yet, please do that by tomorrow. She needs those numbers for food count. It's a fun event. And then the other items are mainly centered on the Pioneer Day. The Widow's Lazy Daughter is part of that. They'll have that play on the 22nd and 24th. People need to get tickets in order to attend that. The tickets are free though. You just need a ticket so they have a count for limited seating. Pioneer Day, that's the entire day. That's from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And so there's endless events, city council, any event you'd like to be involved in, but you'll need to be involved in the parade.
Well, what time's the breakfast arrival? Did we ever decide that?
What time is the what? Sorry?
Arrival for
Breakfast.
breakfast to serve for breakfast.
I believe it was.
The breakfast starts at 7.
Yeah, so maybe like 6:45 for us, and unless I haven't heard that they need help with setup, but I'll talk with, I spoke with Joe this week, so I can ask them, but who can make it to serve breakfast? Joni, you in? We'll see. Okay,
Yeah, let me check
I'm
with
in.
Brad.
so at least 4 of
Do
us.
you think we'll get more than 4 people before 9 a.m.? Remember last year?
Oh my
Everybody slept
gosh.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those events get really big though, that and the charity barbecue. I mean, that's one of the events are the largest in the valley. That breakfast is the largest in the valley throughout the year. The parade is the largest parade in the valley throughout the year, not just a Pioneer Day parade. So these types of events are fantastic, and they're put together on a fraction of the cost of what other cities are spending. So thanks to everyone for volunteering, like the council that just volunteered to help out with the breakfast. That's what makes it possible.
Who is gonna be on the city float? Okay,
I mean, I hope so.
I mean, we'll see. You can apply. No. Okay. Okay, sorry. I
Have a
cut you
really
off.
good way.
Just any other event down there, the police night out, chief has gone over that. That's a great event. Come out and support the police on August 1st. Library closing social. The Vietnam Memorial Wall will be there on the August 21st through 28th on the Pony Field at Elkridge Park. That's a amazing tribute that they do, and it's several other conflicts that they have memorials there on that week. And then just going through the rest of the items and following in line with what the survey basically said from the citizenry and everything else, building on the pumpkin walk. It's something that provides a community identity. You look at an event that I think every year at Utah League of Cities and Towns, someone raises their hand and says, what's an amazing event? And they all raise their hand and say the pumpkin walk. You look at an event with 60,000 people in attendance and a cost of 5,000 to 6,000. Which we make back most of that through donations and people coming through the line and donating. It's just unheard of across the state. So just building on that, and we'll have several other events. Basically the pickleball tournament, a pumpkin run, a pumpkin smash is a 3v3 tourney that we're looking at doing, teaming up with other groups. But keep in mind, a lot of these things we just do and we team up with other organizations. So there's little or no cost to the city at the end of the day. But they do bring out thousands, like the pumpkin toss, it's 3,000 to 5,000 people. So we're just looking at building on those things, and Jesse's looking at even tying in his carnival that he did later in the summer last year, just more into a pumpkin carnival down at the high school. So we'll see if we can tie in all these things and just build it more into a pumpkin days. Just keep that in mind as we get closer to that.
Would this be where we would do like the pumpkin princess?
We can talk about that at some point.
Okay,
I mean, our float is a
Sorry.
pumpkin.
Those are the only items I was bringing up. And then also, keep you in touch. Where is that on here? Well, voting primary, but there's also the, Utah League of Cities and Towns. Keep in touch with Scott regarding that. September 6th through 8th. If you're going to attend that, you need to know as early as possible.
does he need to know right now? Is that,
Probably in the coming weeks.
do we want to get a rough head count? I mean,
Even if we
I
get
know
a
it's
rough
not
head
here.
count, you still need to let Scott know which days you'll be attending.
okay.
So you'll each need to email him. So just put down a note, email him tonight or the next week. Those are the dates, September 6th through 8th. So if you can attend 1 day, 2 days, any of those days throughout there, just let him know.
Are we shifting our city council meeting probably then that week?
That's a good point.
Yeah, because it's super early this year.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, and last year was in October.
Right, and I
But
think
usually it's the second week of September. And so, yeah, the city council is gonna have to decide on that, which weeks they shift or have one, or how you approach that month.
Okay. Okay, all right, anything else?
No, sorry, I have to.
Okay. And then, so I would accept a motion to take a recess, and then we'll go into executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Buzzy, I think, second by Emily. All in favor?